Hello. Welcome to the closing session of the HT Radar Research Conference. We are so happy to have had all of you with us today, spread across 4 different pathways and 4 general sessions. It's been a really rich and full day, and we're thrilled for those of you who are sticking with us so that we can take us over the finish line with what I know will be a really interesting conversation that I'm thrilled to get to host. So I'm going to just jump right in so that we have, because we only have a few minutes here before we close out the day, and I want to make sure we get as much time for this conversation as possible. But I wanted to start by introducing you to Dave Oates, who is a colleague and friend and past president of the Rotary Club of San Diego, which is the 4th largest service club in the world. And Dave made anti-human trafficking causes the central theme of his term. And that's how we got the opportunity to meet and have continued to talk since then. He is an accredited PR specialist and a great example of someone who turned their expertise toward doing good in the community. And so I asked Dave if he would moderate this conversation. Rotary Club District 5340 is a presenting sponsor of the conference. We're so grateful for their support. They're very committed to increasing awareness in the San Diego community around human trafficking. And so I asked Dave if he would moderate a conversation with us today as a way to close out our session, and as a follow-up to conversations that he and I have had over the last couple of years. And so we asked HTI Labs to come and meet with us, and one of our co-presenters for this session, Krista Price, is stuck on an airplane flight right now. I'm not going to say anything about Southwest, but I don't know which airline it is. But that's Dave, that's your work, the PR work. But let me just tell you a little bit about HTI Labs. And we have Katie Patino here. You can turn your camera on.
Hi, actually, I think you need to enable my camera. It says,
oh, thank you. Okay, someone hopefully can do that besides me, because we will make, I know one of our angels in the background will figure that out, or they'll come running in here to help me. So that's why we're not seeing you, but I'll go ahead and talk about you. We'll see your face in a minute. So Catherine, she goes by Katie Patino, is the head of research and data science at HTI Labs, guiding research projects and leading HTI Labs project of predicting trafficking risk in the online commercial sex industry. This includes spearheading the technical development, monitoring, and analysis of continuously scraped online commercial sex data. Katie has an MS and a BS in biological systems engineering from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, with 8 years of biomedical research experience prior to joining HTI Labs. HTI Labs was founded in 2018 by founder and CEO Krista Price, and their work supports law enforcement, service providers, government agencies, and policymakers in their shared goal of supporting trafficking and sexual assault survivors and identifying and holding perpetrators accountable. I think we may be close to letting your video work, Katie, because I think you're a co-host now. I'm hoping. Yay!
There we go.
It's the perfect end to a day in our new world of online conferences. I've been to a lot of them in the last 2 years. This is the first one that the center has hosted, and I'll tell you, I feel like it's gone really quite smoothly. But we're all just on the edge of a little bit of a deflation here as we have navigated the last 8 hours. So I'm so glad that we got your face to your name, Katie. So welcome. And Dave, I'm going to just throw it to you because you are extraordinary at moderating conversations. And so I'm going to turn my camera off and just let the two of you have a conversation, and then I'll pop back in about 25 minutes, and we'll close out the day. So Dave, kick it to you.
Thanks so much, Kim. And hey, thank you to your team for putting this together amidst some extraordinary circumstances. I think 2020 was certainly a challenging year, but I would submit 2021 is even more of a challenge as we're sort of in this stop-go stage of online, offline, and points in between. And it's been pulling people in so many different directions. And congratulations too to the nearly 100 of you who are still with us today after a successful full conference day. It's great to have you here. And it's truly a privilege, both from as a representative of the 3,000 Rotarians that comprise San Diego and Imperial counties, but also for me personally, as Kim alluded to, I am the past president of a pretty large Rotary club in town. And as I was ascending from certain levels in the executive committee, you get afforded the opportunity to create a theme. Well, about 2 years prior to my presidency, I had the interesting encounter with a young person who was a survivor of human trafficking. This person was involved in a youth initiative that we were putting together in my Rotary club, and had the courage and convictions to tell essentially 80 other students for whom she had never met prior to that day that she was a human trafficking survivor. And for me personally, it was a wake-up call. I did not really understand how pervasive the problem was, nor did I understand the sort of factors that created necessarily a victim, but also the exploiter and the buyer. And so at that moment, I decided to at least start to have conversations with qualified people to tell me not only what was the scope of the scourge here in San Diego County, but also what were some of the ways in which we Rotarians, people of action from all different corners of San Diego County, representing pretty much all of the business, civic, and social sub-communities in this area, how we can get involved. And that led me to Kim and Point Loma Nazarene University, as well as a slew of other organizations like Free to Thrive and Like to Do So. A reason that I'm interested in having a conversation with you, Katie, is really based on a conversation that Kim and I had a couple years ago, as I was beginning to really grasp where we could affect change. One of the things that Kim challenged me was the idea of having empathy, not just for the victims and certainly the survivors, but also really having an understanding as to what comprises the characteristics of an exploiter, but also a buyer. Speaking as a business person and speaking as a type A personality, we always want to champion those who are victimized, those who are put in positions of not their own choosing. And so it was hard for me to get my head around the exploiter and the buyer as being people that for which I should express empathy and certainly think about how best to bring them into and serve what are in many cases some exploitations and some abuse in their background to really solve this problem on a holistic level. So if I could, let me just start with the first question to you. Given your research and certainly given your experience, what are some of the sex buyer preferences that create this trafficking environment? It doesn't happen without demand. Why is it that there is this demand, and what are sort of the archetype characteristics of a buyer of someone?
So what's interesting is that Kim mentioned in the intro that one of the main projects that I lead is the scraping of online commercial sex ads and analyzing that to understand characteristics of the market and to ultimately identify trafficking networks. But what's interesting about these ads is, ads cater to the tastes of consumers. So in the case of commercial sex ads, we can see it provides insight into market demand because they cater to what sex buyers want. And so one thing that really stood out in our commercial sex ad research is how that can definitely shape the trafficking environment. For example, in general, obviously, I'm going to generalize this, but trafficking can look like many different things. But in general, we see that buyers want young, new women and girls. And so we see this in our data where the younger the individual being sold for sex is, the higher their hourly price. The longer they've stayed in the industry, the lower that price goes down. And then, so this creates a premium on youth. The second premium, the newness premium, basically what we're seeing is that it can actually be retained longer if the person being sold for sex is traveling around because it provides this newness to the buyers. And so this means that this demand for fresh new faces causes these individuals being sold for sex in multiple markets, multiple locales, and because there's an incentive for higher profits there. This is actually especially the case for smaller cities, smaller towns, lower population, there's a lot of in and outs, and most of the sex providers there are just traveling in and out. So overall, these specific sex buyer preferences actually incentivize traffickers to recruit new, younger victims. And so that answer really addresses your question of how do sex providers cater the trafficking environment. I wanted to start there before we kind of get more into, what factors influence demand.
Yeah, it's a great. Yeah, and so this the follow-up question is then what are the specific factors then? Given sort of that baseline, then I would like you to walk through a little bit more on the factors that influence demand, but then also how have those informed, demand reduction techniques? How do we, now that we sort of understand the factors, how do we address that so that way the demand reduces, and then obviously the recruitment of young, and in your place, younger women can abate?
Yeah, so it's important to note that there's no one size fits all method to demand, and right. That is because there's not a single motivation. There's not just one motivation for people to buy sex. It can vary, right? We know that the motivations and the reasons for stopping can vary among people, and so everything I'll go through now. It's just keep that in mind that makes it tough. This demand reduction focus makes it tough because people buy sex and stop buying sex for different reasons. But what's been found, so in research, is that there's multiple different factors that can affect, that are essentially determinants of demand. One is social stigma. So it's been found that increasing social stigma can decrease demand. Although it has been found that the law actually doesn't affect stigma, which is interesting. But some techniques to reduce demand that have come out of this have been things like, there's cities trying things like Dear John letters, where they actually send a letter home to the sex buyer's house. You can see how that has moral implications, because now it's affecting their family, and if they have kids, it's affecting their kids to find out that. There's also cities that are posting the pictures of the Johns on a public website after they get caught. So you can just see how these are techniques that really address that social stigma aspect of sex buying that could cause someone to stop. Another factor that has been found to affect demand is perceived risk of arrest. And so obviously sex buyer sting operations would fall into this category, to try to heighten, just to arrest more so that buyers do get arrested more, as well as increase legal penalties. And another interesting thing about just really focusing on increasing the perception and not necessarily actually increasing arrests could be, law enforcement actually publicizing their operations to crack down on sex buying, or posting on John's boards to influence the perception of arrest, like truly having bots or people posting things on these sex buyer forums to make them like fear that there's law enforcement present. Right. But these are some interesting techniques that can really focus on that perceived risk of arrest.
I'd like you to expand a little bit on that, because the examples that you gave and some of the other ways in which to sort of reduce the demand have a lot to do with sort of, I'll just call it public shaming, for lack of a better word, or certainly highlighting on that. And I can see for a lot of cases that is most effective and most appropriate. Excuse me. What about the buyers who've been abused themselves? And this is sort of, as I understand it, in many cases, buyers are also victims who are also could be exploiters, and there's a generational issue, much in the same way that there is in physical abuse, families with physical abuse or things like that. Has there been any discussions as to other intervention techniques to reduce demand?
Yeah, so, well, this might go along with that, is that one of the main drivers of sex buying is actually normalized beliefs, the belief that it's a victimless crime, that they're just doing it to meet their needs, and things like that. And so, techniques that address that really could be, prevention education to basically decrease toxic masculinity at a young age, as young as possible, is a one that would really kind of focus in that area. There's also been cities trying John schools. It's basically this, it's like a diversion program. Sex offender gets caught, they're sent to this diversion program where they are try to basically get them to feel empathy for the people, you know, the sex providers. And so it's interesting that you bring that up because actually perpetrators and victims, perpetrators are often victims themselves and other, like you said, and in those other abuses. And so I think finding ways to address the, you know, the normalized belief that it is a victimless crime to them is it's actually the way in a survey that was done that was found that that's the biggest reason that people stop, is because they realize that it doesn't fit with their moral beliefs.
Right.
So I don't know if a way of getting them to feel empathy for the sex providers is to better understand what they've gone through in their lives, and because empathy, right, is the answer all around. But
well, and I appreciate you having that conversation and sort of that explanation, because it's one of the things that we've been trying to, at least in my Rotary, my experiences with other Rotarians and other people that I talk to, because we immediately go into good people, bad people, right? Good people are the victims, certainly the ones who are exploited, and the bad people are the exploiters and the buyers. And I'm certainly not trying to excuse away or discount the perpetration of an act against another. But one of the things that has struck me, and Kim and others have been helpful in that, is this is a very complex situation in which there are multiple victims on multiple fronts, and if we don't address that with different modalities, we're not solving the problem, and ultimately that's where we're getting to. But regardless of how you reduce demand or all of the tools you use to reduce demand, I guess the question is, if we reduce demand, do we not have an issue? Is that the core? Is that where we need to focus on, or are there other things that we need to incorporate?
So in the complete absence of demand, with zero demand, yes, so theoretically we wouldn't have an issue. It's market, there's absolute zero demand now. But that's just, in the reality, that's not the case. So by just reducing it in the absence of any increases in economic opportunities for women, it actually can cause a lot of unintended consequences. So just affecting the lever of demand, we'll see increased competition among sex providers that essentially drives down the prices. They're having to work more for the same amount of money. And in the case of trafficking victims, they're having to often like fill quotas to, and just do more sex acts for less amount of money. And so that's the concern there, which the supply still, you know, if demand is even still there a little bit, there will be supply there to meet it. And then now, if without opportunities for these women, what do? They have to do more for less money. And so actually the COVID pandemic has been an interesting example of this in a way. So by studying both our commercial sex ad data and just looking into online forums and what people are saying, you know, in this case with COVID, it's economic duress for everyone. So we've actually seen we've seen evidence of demand decreasing. Sex buyers saying they have to stop because they don't have the money to do that anymore. Or business travel has been cut, and that's generally, you know, when they would buy sex. And so we're seeing demand decrease, but supply is actually increasing because, again, it's economic duress for everyone. It's a hard time. And so we've seen an influx of new sex providers, especially in the online commercial sex market. It's an easy way to enter the industry. But you know, we see evidence of them basically having lower prices or having to do more for less. I've even seen someone, you know, a sex buyer on social media say that they're like, oh, the power's in our hands because demand is so low. And I mean, that's concerning, right? We don't want buyers and traffickers to be like, oh, this is a great time for us. The power's in our hands. And so, but that's what's been happening because of the pandemic. And so it's just, it's an interesting example, an interesting real life example without anything but just, you know, is the COVID that caused this reduction in demand. We see how without the accompanying increase in these opportunities to help the women get a path out, it's ultimately going to have those unintended consequences.
And let me do a quick sidebar question to you then with that. With COVID and obviously the stay-at-home restrictions and things like that, sex trafficking moved even more so online than before, which was a significant portion of that. The question that I've got is it easier in some respects then to engage a victim or a buyer to intervene, if you will, to try to offer a victim at, you know, when they so choose to leave that, but also the buyers in order to do so? Because, you know, it's a quick search, right, on whatever social media platform you want to use to do that. Or is it as or more difficult than it might have been in non-COVID times?
Sorry, so I just want to make sure I understand. Is it easier or harder for a sex buyer to essentially find?
No, I was thinking from an intervention standpoint to reduce demand and also reduce there. Is it easier for organizations like Point Loma Nazarene or others to engage to try to prevent, to try to get survivors and victims an opportunity to leave that world, but also the buyers to recognize, in fact, that this is not a path that you should continue to go down?
That's an interesting thought. I don't have the answer to that, but I could see how, just like this pandemic is causing us all to, you know, think about life differently and things differently, because there's just a lot of changes. I could imagine that it could be a good time to.
Rule number one in business, right, is for every problem there's a solution, and for every issue there's an opportunity. And so I was just curious if research had taken us down that path yet. Yeah, and no, everything's still evolving to the point that we're all still trying to figure out what this world is. And
and I know though from the standpoint of, you know, chaos in the commercial sex industry is just, it's bad for women, because chaos means traffickers exploiting or sex buyers taking advantage. And so, but it's an interesting thought of, you know, in this chaos, can we use it as an opportunity to actually intervene for the better and try to help survivors get services, you know, and help identify traffickers? It's an interesting thought, or help engage in sex buyers to reduce demand. Yeah.
I appreciate Jill letting me have that conversation. Let me bring that topic up. Let's get back to the point that you were sort of bringing up, which was the idea about approaching this problem from a single element standpoint, one aspect of the market. You sort of touched on sort of the issues around that when we talked about the reduction of demand to theoretical zero. Are there any other examples of addressing a single element in the market only can have unintended consequences like you described for demand?
Yeah, so another example of this is actually targeted enforcement of online venues. So the FOSTA and SESTA bill package was passed in April 2018. Mm-hmm. Some of you may be familiar with that, but basically that a result of that was the package essentially made it so that U.S. companies would be they'd be liable for sex trafficking ads being posted on their sites. And so this basically caused U.S. sites that had commercial sex ads to either shut down or move overseas and have their servers overseas. Backpage.com was, you know, the big market hub for online sex advertising, and that shut down in April 2018 as a result of this. And so there still isn't a lot of formal research about the effects of that Backpage shutdown in terms of trafficking prevalence. It's something that we're definitely interested in trying to do. But we know from past examples of this, like Craigslist, escort boards shutting down, we know that these shutting down these sites doesn't actually change the number of individuals sold for sex, and therefore doesn't affect trafficking prevalence. Instead, it actually ends up scattering the online market to multiple different websites, causes some people to have to go out on the streets, and in the chaos of like, where do I advertise? They have to go out on the streets, which is much more dangerous and a lot more violence and exploitation there. And it actually causes traffickers to think more creatively about how to advertise so that they don't get caught. And so, basically, this is just another example of like that creates chaos, and traffickers use this chaos as an opportunity to recruit. And so while we acknowledge that, many trafficking survivors fought for the passage of this law, and we definitely acknowledge that, but it actually led to unintended negative consequences.
I appreciate you bringing that up. It's one of those scenarios where it's well intended, but the actions always want to be measured against what are unintended consequences or blowback in this case. So let me ask this as the final question, sort of the call to action to folks like myself and other people who might be watching this either live or in a recorded. What is, and what are in general terms the best approaches to this? How can we make sure that we're effective on that? What's the call to action?
Yeah, so we've found that the best approach is this holistic approach that basically 3 areas need to be addressed simultaneously through policy work and community efforts. And those 3 areas are: 1, demand, decreasing demand, just like we talked about. That's still, it's still an important lever that needs to be addressed. 2, oh, it's going dark on me. I'm not moving enough in here. The second area that needs to be addressed is increasing economic opportunities for women, like I had briefly mentioned earlier. An example of this is we helped write a bill actually here in Nebraska that essentially expunges the records of victims of trafficking who had criminal records due to crimes that they were forced to commit while being trafficked. Those records would prevent them from being able to get jobs and to truly like get out of that life and to get on a better path. And so there's now a law here that basically seals those away and allows them to move on with their lives. So that's just an example of how policy work can really focus on increasing economic opportunities to give people a way out. And then lastly, and we haven't touched on this yet, but identifying and dismantling trafficking networks. Traffickers are going to keep being traffickers. They will keep recruiting and move on to the next set of women. And it's just, without tackling that arm, that's a big problem. Like, obviously we know demand is important, and we know we need to help get these women on a better path, but like we need to hold these traffickers accountable. We need to identify them, and both are hard. Identifying, they're behind the scenes and everything, so that's hard. Actually getting them a conviction is hard. Proving force, fraud, or coercion, it's a difficult thing. But so ways to address that arm is information sharing and long-term investigations should really be facilitated. So in a community, there should be, and this is what our HTI tools help facilitate, is basically information sharing from even between service providers that are, that can basically, they may know some red flags that law enforcement doesn't. By connecting those dots and giving them a way to information share, together, the red flags that they both know might be like a big red siren of like, yes, this is trafficking. We need to help. We need to get this perpetrator in jail, and we also need to help this woman get the services she needs and get her on the right path. And so those 3 arms, when addressed simultaneously, is the best strategy, and it's where community efforts and policy work should continue to focus.
Well, there is certainly a strong interest by the community, business leaders, community leaders. Maybe we were a little late to the game, but I will tell you there's a strong interest in being part of the solution and doing things that affect lasting, sustained change. So, Katie, this has been a real pleasure for me, and I know it's been a valuable time. I thank you so much for joining us from the Midwest and coming out here and even dealing with the lights going off there, because it's Friday at 6:30 your time, and most people are out of the offices by then.
Thank you.
Been a real pleasure.
Yeah, no,
Kim, thanks for the opportunity. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave and Katie, for finishing up this really full, rich day with a very important conversation. And thank you, Katie, for so articulately bringing home that call to action for us. So with that, we are going to close out the 2021 Human Trafficking Research Conference. led by the Center for Justice and Reconciliation at Point Loma Nazarene University. Thanks to the support of the San Diego Office of the District Attorney, Summer Steffen and her team. We couldn't do this without their support. And I also want to acknowledge a very special dream team that you have seen glimpses of today, and that is the team of mine here at the center. Allison and Frederick and Luz Aramburo, who led the planning and implementation of this conference. It's a massive undertaking to do something like this, especially when it's our first time to do it and we're still navigating all of the complexities of doing an online conference. And to the rest of the CJR staff team, Rihanna Contreras, Jessica Kim, Naaman, and Clara Ann Wagner, for all of your different expertise that you brought to the table to make this happen. So grateful for all of you. So thankful I get to work with each of you every day. And to our incredible student team who oftentimes know more about these technology challenges than certainly I do. Kyla, Katie, Katrina, Liana, and Zach, thank you for sticking it out. You worked a lot of extra hours this week. And I'm going to send everyone off with wishes for a weekend of rest and rejuvenation. This is hard work. It is exhausting. It can be frustrating and painful and all of those things. It also has moments of great hope. And we at the university try to really stand in those spaces of hope in the work that we do. And we're thankful that we get to do that. And so to all of you who have spent your day on this topic and exposing yourselves to this information, thank you for your commitment to the work. And I hope that it's been an encouraging day, and I hope that it starts lots of additional conversations and new collaborations, new partnerships, new dreams for our nation, and for where we can go when we go together, knowing that when we go together, we go farther. So thank you, all of you, for being here. And with that, I wish you all a great weekend and look forward to seeing you the next time. And we will be in touch with you about our next quarterly meeting, which will be focusing on survivor-led research. So we'll get word out to you about that. But in the meantime, enjoy your weekend. And thanks again for joining us today.